Hey, it's Mo Black, and I've got some things I want to get off my chest. So if you're wondering why this is Reflection 2, it's because Reflection 1 I wrote on Medium. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, then there should be a link in the description, and if you're reading the transcript on Medium, then there should be a link now, after this paragraph. Nice. Anyway, so today I wanted to talk about this thing some more. Okay, wait, don't leave just yet. This video is not about ContraPoints. We're done talking about ContraPoints. It's okay. It's what I want to do instead take this a little bit more meta and talk instead about I guess more around BreadTube and content creation and my experiences with it being completely new to everything that's happening and just going along with it. So, just for a little context about that piece, what I call it, I gave it some dumb name hey, Contra said a thing. Well, I guess I better single-handedly solve BreadTube. Yeah, that was it. So the thing about it is that I didn't put a lot of effort into it. All right, let me explain. I was basically just on Reddit, just consuming Contra drama, and it kind of pissed me off how focused everything was on getting Contra specifically to apologize, getting Contra specifically to fix everything wrong with BreadTube. There are a lot of people who, I think rightfully so, had a lot of different complaints about BreadTube, especially non-binary people who are I don't really feel represented by these people. This is supposed to be a movement where we take on the rights and we make social change, but I don't fit here. And the people that we idolize, the people that we worship almost, they're not doing their part in making me feel like I belong here, feel like I have a voice, right? And I was reading all these things, and I just got kind of frustrated. So I was talking with my friend, and at one point I was just all of these problems are capitalism. Am I wrong? And then they at least agreed with me. They were yeah, that's pretty obvious. So I was well, if it's obvious, then why does no one else seem to realize this? So I sat down that night. I spent an hour or so just writing down all my thoughts. Gave it a nice thumbnail so everyone knows what I was talking about. Give it a catchy title. I spent the next morning I edited it the next morning, and I scheduled to publish it in the afternoon. But I couldn't post it on Reddit until I got back from class in the evening. And when I got back, it was it had already made the rounds in certain parts of the internet. It was far more engaging than I'm used to. It got a lot more attention, a lot more positive feedback than I'm used to, but also a lot more criticism than I'm used to. So that was interesting. So here's the thing, though. I appreciate all of you who are here because you read it and you liked it. There's quite a lot of you, proportionally speaking. But here's the thing. So take this essay that I spent an hour on. Medium gives me the metrics for all this stuff. The far left is reads, and then the next number. Okay. The far left is views, and then the next number is reads. My bad. But take this thing that I spent an hour doing. Now compare it to this essay, which is the only other video on this channel for now, that I spent 2 months writing and researching and perfecting on the commodification of sexuality and in anime, and how companies will basically sell you sexism if it makes a profit, right? Yeah. In the time that in a couple of hours, that one Contra thing got twice the views as the entire lifetime of any other thing that I've actually put effort into that I've written. And I've sort of come to the conclusion that I can honestly just milk BreadTube drama for clicks. It's really easy. I'm not saying that everyone can do it, but I guess me with my writing style and my guess, talent, I guess, if you want to call it that or whatever, I could just sit down. I could have my thermometer inside up BreadTube's asshole the entire time, taking the temperature. What are people talking about right now? What are people talking about next? And I can just like do that forever. And as long as I don't give the game away, I could probably. I'm not saying that I would like get like 1 million subscribers or whatever, but it's a way more surefire way of getting followers and likes and patrons and stuff like that than actually doing the things that I want to do. And that's sort of the thing that I want to get off my chest right now. Is just this: why do I do art? Like, why do I put effort into things when in reality I'm incentivized, I'm pressured by the platforms that I write for to do things that generate traffic to the website, that generate revenue. Like, for example, right now we're not talking about Contra. I promise I wouldn't talk about Contra. Right? What's the big thing in BreadTube right now? The big thing in BreadTube is cancel culture. Right? It's cancel culture this, cancel culture that. Angie Speaks did her like Exit the Vampire Castle thing, and then she did like a 2-hour conversation about like the Dirtbag Left. That was a little bit while ago. And then like Peter Coffin did a video. That's his their last Many Peters video was on that. Gushin did like 2. Right? So like everyone's all like, why is the left so willing to cancel people? Why are we canceling this? Cancel that, blah 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 blah. Cancel culture, cancel culture. And like I have an opinion on cancel culture. Right? I could sit down, I could open up Medium, I could type into the editor, and I could type my take on cancel culture. It would probably go a little something like this. Cancel culture is fake, you fucks. It doesn't exist. Like, obviously there's a problem with harassing people off the internet, like what unfortunately happened to ContraPoints. But that's not like this special left-wing phenomenon of just harassing everyone that disagrees with you. Like, this is just Twitter culture. This is just internet culture. This is just what happens. Tell me something. Why is it that when the right goes after journalists, goes after content creators, they like smear like game developers, they like harass actors and actresses and directors? Why is that when that happens to those types of people who say or do anything mildly progressive in center-right spaces, why is that never cancel culture? But then when the left or liberals do the same thing, that's cancel culture. That's a problem. That's something we're hand-whinging about. And like the answer is because cancel culture doesn't like exist. It was made up by the right to smear the left. It's a framing tactic. It's a framing tactic that the right uses to present the left as unreasonable, overly hostile, overly aggressive, and puritanical. I'm not saying that the left doesn't have those elements in them online, but it doesn't have them there any more than the right does. Like, when I spend a lot of time in anime, because that's what I do, I read anime, and like when an anime like has any sort of positive like representation for women that is like not sexualizing and not like pandering to the male audience, a lot of those creators get canceled. When for example Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, for example, had their dub makers change some of the lines from the translation to the English dub, such that the lines were a little bit less fucking sexist and weird. Or there was like this gal anime that did the same thing. Those creators, Funimation, and those people who were in charge of that got canceled. They got harassed because they broke the bubble of the right that exists in anime. Why is that not cancel culture? But then when something happens to ContraPoints, that's cancel culture. Right? It's this double standard that the right has created to mask all of the things they do as like neutral and normal, and everything the left does as insane and crazy. And the fact that we still have people who I respect, like Peter Coffin, like buying into this idea that there's like a specific problem on the left of people like being puritanical and harassing people and this and that. That to me is really frustrating. So anyway, that was like what, like 3 minutes? Like I could do that. I could take that whole rant. I could make it into a Medium essay and I could publish it. And you never know what's going to be successful and what's not going to be successful. But I could tell you that it wouldn't do so bad. Like that rant wouldn't do that bad at all. Um, and that's kind of like my problem here. Um, if I were to do that, if I were to just chase the market, chase the numbers, chase the metrics, um, I wouldn't be an artist anymore. I mean, like, not really. I would I wouldn't be an educator either. I would At that point I'm just acting like a capitalist, right? I'm concerned about my market. I'm concerned about my brand. I'm concerned about building social capital and followers and like credibility. I mean, eventually, if I did that, enough people would trust me. They would trust my takes, and maybe if my personality was open and honest enough, maybe we'd start to develop some parasocial relationships here and there. And there's nothing like inherently wrong with bread2 criticizing itself. And I think it's important to have a space to talk about like the drama that exists within bread2. But again, that's not praxis. That when I published the first thing on Contra, a lot of people they added me in the comments. They're like, "Hey, you said BreadTube isn't praxis, but then you recommended reading books. Books are buying things. Is that not praxis?" And I didn't really expect this response, kind of because I think it's dumb. Sorry, but I unfortunately I didn't really do a good job of explaining why this isn't true. But the reason why passively consuming BreadTube isn't praxis, but like reading a book could be, is because when academics publish journals and publish books, yes, they have these like incentives to like do the thing that like is most likely to get them funding, for example, or something like that. Yes, there are capitalist pressures on them, but they're far, 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 far less reduced. When you're an academic, I mean, they're far more reduced. They're less present. When you're an academic, you are backed at the very least by an institution. Sometimes you're even backed by public funding, right? Or at the very least, you're like a professor who's tenured. You have like some kind of financial stability. That's not something that breadtubers have, right? Academics can publish the things that they honestly think are important, and all they need to do is convince a committee that they're important. But breadtubers, there's no one to convince. We're just posting stuff online, and we're hoping that the algorithm, or in Medium's case, the curators, like pick our stuff to show people, and we're hoping that like the nameless, faceless forces of like Twitter or like Facebook or YouTube like share our content around with everyone else, right? And those platforms are not publishing things in the interest of like what's most interesting, what needs to be said, like a lot of like publicly funded like academic institutions are. Those platforms are only interested in one thing, and that one thing is, will this bring more people to use my platform, yes or no? And that's the issue. These pressures are not intuitive. They weren't intuitive to me even until you like try to start posting stuff online. And then you kind of realize all the subtle ways in which these platforms like dissuade you from doing art, dissuade you from doing the things that you want to do, dissuade you from doing things that you think are important, and sort of like nudge you into the direction of the places where you already know that there's a market. You already know that people are interested in it. You already know that people are going to buy into your premise, into your format, into what you have to say. I talked a lot about like doing anime. I mean, I run what I call most home for treatises and hot takes, right? Like what is a treatise? For me, at least, a treatise is it is tied fundamentally to being about anime. I will never do like a fucking like 12,000 word essay on something that isn't anime. Well, okay, maybe I might, but for now, no. Like my specialty is reading an anime and like giving a deconstruction of it. I mean, that's what the other video on this channel is, right? So if that's the case, then why have I aligned myself with BreadTube? AniTube exists, anime YouTube. They have a market. They've got Digibro, they've got Best Guy Ever, they've got Mother's Basement, they've got Gigug, they've got Gigug's wife. I forgot her name. They've got all these like really good and neat content creators, right? So why am I here and not there? And the answer is because I did the obvious thing. I took my essays, I took my work, and I presented them in anime circles. I tried to style myself after. A lot of my writing is actually like based in part off Digibro. I don't agree with him politically in the slightest, and I think his takes are kind of whack a lot of the time. But like the kind of like caustic sort of smug nature of my writing is in large part informed by a lot of different AniTubers. And so I kind of tried to take that format in written form, and I tried to sell it to various anime communities online. Nowhere. That shit went nowhere. And you want to know why? It's not because I can't write. I can always improve, but it's not because I can't write. It's because AniTube as a market is not ready yet to accept like SJW or like left wing or like socialist analysis of anime. It's just not. There's a couple of like left wing anime creators, but they exist in their own bubble. They're like entirely disconnected from the rest of AniTube, right? And so what I did is I switched markets. I switched from the AniTube market to the BreadTube market. And there's nothing like wrong with that, but I just want people to realize there's a lot of people who like think of BreadTube as if it's not just the same thing as AniTube, or it's not the same thing as whatever market PewDiePie runs, or it's not just the same thing as the market for makeup tutorials, or it's not just the same thing as the market for self-help on YouTube. They are the same thing. That's why just passively consuming BreadTube can like never be praxis. There's a French word I learned recently. It's vulgarisateur. I'm kind of pronouncing it badly because I've been speaking English for this whole time. But a vulgarisateur is somebody that vulgarizes. In other words, that's the French word for like Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Lawrence Strauss, like all these people that like take like complex scientific topics and like boil it down so that people can understand. They take scientific theory, they take quantum mechanics, and they vulgarize it so that, you know, the everyday people can like have some sort of understanding in what that is. And those people are important. Bill Nye is important. Neil deGrasse Tyson is important, although he probably sexually harassed someone. Michio Kaku is important. Brian Greene is important. Like, when I was a kid, I loved all those guys, right? But watching a bunch of Bill Nye videos or reading Michio Kaku's latest book doesn't really make you qualified to teach a science class. It makes you informed, and it makes you entertained, and that's good. But you're not like qualified to teach a science class. In the same way, watching a bunch of BreadTube doesn't make you qualified to do praxis, right? You need either the practical knowledge that comes from like actually like staying informed enough to vote, actually convincing people who to vote for, actually joining an organization, actually trying to unionize your workforce, or like actually trying to make your own content. I think a lot of people miss this. I said consuming BreadTube isn't praxis, but like making your own stuff, writing your own essays, that's definitely praxis, right? You need to be informed in a way that's like outside BreadTube, because the reality is, because of like the market nature of BreadTube, there's always going to be like another ContraPoints. There's always going to be a time when some of these people like have blind spots, and when they have blind spots, they like fuck up in like really big and obvious ways that are important. There's always going to be stuff that's like super important and super relevant that will never ever get talked about on BreadTube, simply because the market isn't ready for that yet. And you don't want to rely on what the market is ready or not ready to inform like what you want to learn about, what you want to understand, what's important to you, and like how you can make a difference to like make the world a better place. BreadTube's a good place to start. A lot of these content creators will like leave their sources in the description. I think Ollie does that. Like that's good to keep in mind. Like click on those, read them. But if as long as you treat BreadTube as like what it isn't, as long as you treat it like a movement, like your main vehicle as social, if your main vehicle for social change is being subscribed to ContraPoints, then you're not changing anything. That's the entire point that I wanted to say. That's what both my first essay on this and this experience of having that essay be so ridiculously popular, at least from my point of view, that's pretty much all I had to say on that front. Anyway, thanks for listening. I've got the next anime essay. The first draft is in fact done. It's like 19,800 words. Fuck me. Up the ass. So I've got to edit that, and then I've got to do all the recording, and then I've got to edit the video, and then I've got to like do the subtitles, and I've got to translate all the subtitles in French, and then I will post that. So that should be like a week or something. Make sure to subscribe. Follow me on Medium. I'm working on a way to like combine Medium and YouTube together, so that when I publish something anywhere, people who like me and are interested in it can follow. I'm not really sure what the best way to do that is quite yet, but I will figure it out soon enough. See ya. Love you guys.